somebody wants to learn how to make more money and you tell them do some stuff, they go do the stuff. Yeah. But when somebody wants to change their diet,
oh my God,
they do the stuff for about a week. We've had over 100,000 people in over 100 countries go through this program. It has been by far my the professional achievement that I'm most proud of. But it only happened because I failed the first time. Many people are living in this kind of suffering, struggling stage. Like, how do I get to the next level of something? And when your health is not right, then everything is harder. And so I think that's the thing that I'd have to say I'm most proud of.
Eric Edmeades, an award-winning keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and a creator of behavioral change dynamics. Eric has spent over 2 decades as a successful entrepreneur, building, scaling, and selling companies across various industries. His unique ability to teach leadership and communication through practical experiences is evidenced by programs like See You at the Top, where he led participants on life-changing expeditions to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. As a dynamic and sought-after speaker, Eric has spoken in over 20 countries, sharing the stage with icons like Sir Richard Branson, Sharma, and President Bill Clinton. He's also the creator of the WILDFIT program, a transformative health program that has impacted thousands globally. Did you get ever an advice that really changed your life?
Many, many times. Main reasons that
This episode is sponsored by El Shamal Holding. We'll be showcasing their newly unveiled Dubai Harbour residences. Shamal Holdings, the visionaries behind the Dubai Harbour, this project offers an unmatched beachfront lifestyle with vibrant marinas and quick access to Sheikh Zayed Road. So let's take a closer look at the key highlights of Dubai Harbour Residences, a project designed to redefine luxury living. They have a super prime location. Located in Dubai Harbour, these residences offer stunning sea and city views, just steps from top hospitality, entertainment, and region's largest marina. They also have an unmatched connectivity, with the new RTA bridge reduces travel times to and from the harbour to just 3 minutes, making the daily commutes effortless. And it's Dubai's first beachfront low-rise experience that offers 345 premium apartments and penthouses across 8 floors, with a choice of 1, 2, 3, or 4 bedroom apartments and penthouses, creating a private yet luxurious atmosphere. With their elegant interiors and top-tier amenities stepping into luxury with high-ceiling lobbies, marble flooring, and carefully curated art installations, residents can unwind at the rooftop infinity pool, enjoy a workout in a state-of-art fitness center, or relax in the spa. Family-friendly spaces add to the experience, offering everything needed for a well-rounded and fulfilling lifestyle. Dubai Harbour Residences is more than just a place to live. It's a vibrant beachfront community designed for those who seek the extraordinary. It's the perfect blend of luxury, comfort, and unique sense of belonging. So for a closer look at this one-of-a-kind property, visit DubaiHarbourResidences.com today and schedule a tour to see it for yourself. I'll leave the link in the description. Welcome back, Alpha Squad, to another inspiring episode of the Alpha Talks show, the #1 fastest growing show in the region. Today we have a special Alpha guest, Eric Edmeades, an award-winning keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and a creator of behavioral change dynamics. Eric has spent over 2 decades as a successful entrepreneur, building, scaling, and selling companies across various industries. His unique ability to teach leadership and communication through practical experiences is evidenced by programs like See You at the Top, where he led participants on life-changing expeditions to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. As a dynamic and sought-after speaker, Eric has spoken in over 20 countries, sharing the stage with icons like Sir Richard Branson, Sharma, and President Bill Clinton. He's also the creator of the WILDFIT program, a transformative health program that has impacted thousands globally. So today we're diving into Eric's incredible journey, leadership philosophies, and strategies for creating lasting change in both business and personal life. So welcome, Eric, to the Alpha Talk show. It's a pleasure having you today, and it's an honor.
Thanks for having me.
How do you feel today?
Good.
You came to Dubai like 2 days back?
Yesterday, yes.
Enjoying the heat?
Yes. Well, I live in the Caribbean. It's warm. It's a different heat, but
yeah, you know. Different type.
Yeah.
Eric, I have a question which I love to open the show with, is when we publish the episode and people see the thumbnail, the graphics, the title, they will think it's extremely interesting episode. What can you promise them to gain today by giving us their time?
I guess that depends a great deal on where you take the conversation, but I think,
Don't throw it on me.
But I think that I do bring some novel or interesting ideas about entrepreneurship, leadership, communication, mental toughness, like how you navigate your way through life. So let's see where we go.
I'm sure it's going to be a BAM. I love the word BAM. So for the people who doesn't know about your work in general, who's Eric in a nutshell from your perspective?
I'm just insanely curious. I've my entire life I've just had lots of questions, and I've always had the patience and the tenacity to go and get the answers to those questions. And so in the world of business, that's led me very well, because when I started my first company, we were involved in mobile computing and wireless networking. I had to be curious about that, logistics management, and what have you, and that drove me to become knowledgeable and therefore successful in that space. But equally in my hobby life, I became really fascinated with health and nutrition, and that curiosity led me into tons of studies and books, and then going and staying with hunter-gatherer tribes in Africa. So curiosity ultimately has driven me to live what so far seems to have been a fairly interesting life.
I could sense it when I was doing the prep for the interview. I could sense it. But an interesting thing that I found out, you went through the whole spectrum, from a kind of, I'd say, homeless teenager, am I correct, to a successful entrepreneur, and then a keynote speaker and a trainer. Can you share in a nutshell this journey from extreme to the other extreme? And what were the turning points? What happened?
There are many. I'm going to say that the idea that life is always happening for you and not to you is a big part of that. It's like some of the things that I went through, say as a child, I would fight tooth and nail to prevent my kids from having those experiences. But at the same time, I'm incredibly grateful, because those experiences were part of the toughening process, or part of the learning process. So I think that's the first thing, is that it's not like, I've had many things happen in my life where people go, oh, this was bad. And I'm like, well, I might not have enjoyed it, but that doesn't mean it was bad. It was what was necessary at that time to prepare me for what was coming next.
Wow. Can you give us an example? Because the spectrum is...
Yeah, I mean...
Turning points.
The being homeless. I mean, it's funny. I never thought of it that way. Basically, I had a disagreement with my father about my education, and he decided that I couldn't live with him if I didn't follow his educational path, and so I left. Now, I didn't think of myself as homeless at the time. I wasn't sleeping on park benches, but what it did bring in me is a sense of resilience. I mean, this is northern Canada. I was in Edmonton, so it's not like I could have slept on a park bench if I wanted to. I would have died. But what it forced me to do is be really resilient, and resourceful. So, all of us kids hung out at a video arcade where we played games and what have you. And I went up to the manager one day and I negotiated a deal with him. I said, hey, look, you look tired all the time. Let me sleep here at night, and I'll open and close the shop for you. And, probably from a child labor law perspective, he shouldn't have accepted that deal, but he did.
Happened.
But I would never have had to think like that if I wasn't put in that situation in the first place. And that resourcefulness is obviously something that I had to develop quite young, and it served me very well. So not only was it a turning point, but it was a strengthening point. And I think a lot of times people think of turning points as this time when suddenly magically everything's different. And maybe there's some truth to that, but I think the other thing is we have to recognize that a turning point often turns because you've broken through something.
Oof, correct. Yes, I love that. Eric, one thing, if I go back in time, when was your first startup, your first business that you wanted to set up? And what was it?
Well, it depends on what you call a business. I mean, when I was 12 years old, it was snowing a lot. That was life in Canada. And, I just decided that I would go around the neighborhood with my shovel and knock on people's doors and offer to shovel the snow for them.
So you had this in you.
Yeah. So I mean, and I sold seashells in front of my house when I could, and then but I had speaking of turning points, I had quite a breakthrough one day. In the fall when the leaves are all falling, you got to rake those off your lawn or else they'll kill the lawn. So I would go around and and knock on people's doors, same people that I was shoveling the snow for, and go, hey, I'm here to do your leaves now. And I became known for that. And I remember one day I went into this guy's garden to do the leaves, and I was charging per bag of leaves. And he came outside, and I had 2 bags, and I was still doing more work. And it looked like it was going to be 3 bags or so.
Stop here.
And he comes out and he goes, these bags don't look very full.
No way.
And I was like, what? And he goes, let me show you. And he presses the air out and compresses it all the way down. And he shows me I'm only getting them to half capacity. And he goes, so, you're charging by the bag. You can't get cheap on me like that. We're after the value here. Where's your reputation in the value? And that really made an impression on me. It's like, I remember many years later, I was working for this guy, and he said, I would come to the end of the day, I would come to the end of my work of that day, and I would often leave. I'm done. And he would say, well, you have to remember that how we perceive you is important too. If you have nothing left to do, you should pick up a broom and sweep the floor. And I said, well, what if I've already swept the floor? And he said, well, sometimes how we perceive you is more important than reality. You should sweep the floor anyway. And I was like, I just can't think like that. I am here to add actual value. When I am working, something real is happening. And when I'm not working, it's not. But I'm not going to fake it.
True.
And I think that sort of came even from that guy with the leaves, like add value.
But Eric, you worked at the corporate job or not?
Yeah, my first job, well, not my first, my first job out of school was sales, a direct sales job, walking around, knocking on doors and so on. And that was a very tough job. It's Canada, so it's minus whatever outside. But then after that, I was given a chance to interview for a startup company, and I got that job in sales as well, but corporate sales. So selling, buying, selling, and repairing mobile computers, wireless networking systems, and so on. And I helped scale that company. I mean, when I joined, I was the first full-time employee, and 7 years later, we had 150 employees in 4 countries, and it was a very different business.
And you were doing sales in it.
Yeah, high-level corporate sales.
If I go back and I say, okay, there was a turning point after being in corporate, and you said, okay, I'm going to do my business. I'm going to start something of my own. But why I'm saying this, because if I go back, like 20 years back from my age, and I say I'm going to be an entrepreneur, people will look at me and laugh, because entrepreneurship back then was a kind of a job of a person who doesn't have a job.
Yeah.
So if I want to go get married, and I'm going to say to the guy, like, okay, I want to marry your daughter, but I'm an entrepreneur, going to tell me, okay, please leave. Today is absolutely different.
Oh, yeah.
If you're an entrepreneur, it's kind of, wow, you're somebody. Back then, it was you're nobody. At that time, then you decided to become an entrepreneur, where we know culturally across the world, being an entrepreneur is like, how did you make this decision?
Geez, I wish I could tell you that I had some particular strength about me, that I was like, I set out to start a business. But what really happened was that I'd been working for the same man for about 7 years, and he had a tenuous relationship with honesty. And I finally came to the end of it. He just, so many broken promises. There's a book that describes working for him very well. The book was called Big Promises and Little White Lies. It's like you, oh yeah, there's definitely equity coming. You were here at the beginning. The only problem you're going to have in the future is what color your Ferrari should be. I'm like, little did you know, I didn't give a damn about having a Ferrari, but the point is, that was the pitch, and he just kept not delivering on promises. And so one day I took a look at my situation. I'd had a big dispute with him about this equity issue, and his response to that was, well, look, you've done such a great job here in America. I'll send you over to Europe, and if you start the European headquarters, then I'll give you equity in that. And I don't know why I believed him, but I believed him. And I flew across. I'm 25 years old. I hired the new managing director, sales director, rented some office space. Like I'm at 25 years old in another country. I don't know how I thought I could do all this, but I did it. And then I got my contract, and my contract had no equity in it again. And I was like, what's going on here? And I realized at that point it was never going to change. It was the scorpion and the frog. The guy was always going to be a scorpion, and even when it wasn't in his interest, he was going to be a scorpion. And so I quit. I quit my job, but it set me up in a very bizarre situation, because I was under the impression that I was there on a 5-year contract with equity, and so I had just gotten married, and my wife and I would be relatively independently wealthy by the end of that 5 years. So this would be a good time to start having a family, don't you think?
True.
And so we'd been trying to get pregnant for about 2 weeks, and then I got my contract, and it's got the wrong. And I just quit. I sent a notice of resignation, and I made sure, I knew he would say he was sorry, and he would try to snake me back in. And to stop that from happening, I sent my letter of resignation to him. I then sent it to the entire board of the company. And then I sent out a broadcast to the entire employee base saying, hey guys, it's been great working with you, but I'm leaving. So I made it impossible
to get back.
Yeah, there's no way. But still, he called me that Sunday. I sent that on Friday. He still called me on Sunday. He apologized. He told me he'd been childlike about it, that he'd been immature, that he made a mistake, and but I was done. Now it got tricky though, because he owed me about $150,000, $180,000. This is 20 some odd years ago. It was a lot of money. And that was how I was going to set up my new future. And one of my mentors had offered me a job as an investment advisor in Grand Cayman. I'd always wanted to live in the Caribbean. What a great thing. But I would need this money to go. And here's the catch. He decided not to pay me. He decided that it would take me years to sue him, that I probably didn't have the money to sue him. So he just decided not to pay me. So now I'm in England.
Exactly.
Apparently, and the minute I quit, by the way, I went to my wife and I'm like, no more, like, we're not trying to make babies anymore. Too late. Too late. Turns out we already have one in the oven. Like, so now there's a baby on the way, no money coming, and I don't know what to do with my life. And I don't have rich parents. It's not like I could call my parents and say, please bring me home. I didn't have that. And I really was in it. And I also didn't have a visa. So I couldn't even go get a job if I wanted to.
No way. You're completely locked.
I'm locked in the country, have no money to go home, and I'm stuck. And then one of my old clients calls me and he goes, Eric, can you help me find 10 of these computers? And I go, no, I don't work there anymore. And he goes, I know you don't work there anymore. I called there first. Now I'm calling your cell phone. I go, yeah, but I don't do that anymore. And he goes, well, yeah, but you could help me this one time. I said, no. I have a non-compete agreement. I'm not going to. And he goes,
ethical to the bones.
Yeah, he goes, don't worry about that. He goes, there's no chance that we're going to do business with those guys anyway. We only ever did business with them because of you. So we don't like them. We've never liked the owner. We're not going to do it. So you're not competing. And I'm like, oh, that does start to make a little sense to me. And he goes, just help me with this one project. So I'm like, all right, I'll help you with this one. So I know where to find the computers. I go get them for him. I buy them. Of course, I have no money. So I negotiate terms. I go, well, I'll pay you guys on 35, 45 days. I go to him and I go, I need cash up front, prepayment. So he pays me in cash. I go get the computers. I pay them afterward, but I make $7,000. And I'm like,
oh,
holy cow! This is kind of interesting.
Let's get babies now.
We're going to eat this month. This is going to be amazing. And that kind of led to me starting a business. I had no choice.
But can I stop you here and go back? What was the feeling that you had when you felt that you lost everything?
It was terror. I was really afraid. Like I wasn't afraid for me. I've had a feeling of resilience for a long time. Like I even at 18, 19 years old, I felt like you could drop me in any city in the world. As long as there was half passable English around, I would figure it out.
I will manage.
But now I had a wife.
True.
And I had a baby on the way and a dog. And it's like these beings are depending upon me. True. And that was one of the most stressful times of my life when he chose not to pay me and left me out like that. And the joke of it, the irony was he didn't pay me because he was afraid I was going to set up a competitive company. Mm-hmm. I wasn't going to set up a competitive company at all. I was leaving for Grand Cayman. Yeah. The joke, of course, is because he didn't pay me, I ended up setting up a competitive company.
Exactly, true.
Hilarious.
So that was the first company you set it up?
Yeah.
Where the health came into your life, your journey?
Many years before that.
It was the company, the WILDFIT, correct?
Yeah. The topic came up for me many years before that. When I was in my late teens, early 20s, I was very sick all the time and on lots of medications and just suffering. But as often happens with people that are like that, you just kind of get used to it in the end. You don't know you're suffering, True. You just are. And I went through a big health renaissance. I in the space of a month, I lost 35 pounds. I cleared up all the conditions I had. I got off all the medications I was on. And at that point, funny enough, I was talking to my doctor about everything that happened. And I was supposed to be having this surgery and I didn't need the surgery anymore. So But my doctor seemed more concerned about convincing me to still have the surgery than asking me how I fixed everything. Like, you have to imagine, I go into the office, I've lost 35 pounds, all the acne's gone, all the infections are gone, everything's fixed, and they're not asking me how.
How? Just like, let's go commercial. Where is the operation?
It's nothing. So I asked my doctor how long he'd been in medical school, and he told me, like, 6 years. And I asked him how much of that time he was studying food. None. And I was like, what do you mean none? You're a doctor. You've never studied food? And he goes, not beyond cooking it. Like, no. And in that moment, the only way I can describe it is I felt a little like I'm a passenger on a plane, and I just found out the pilots didn't study landing.
Exactly.
Well, somebody's better study the landings. And so at that point, I started researching nutrition, food, health, that sort of stuff as a hobby.
Oh, okay.
And it remained my hobby all through the next 15 years. I didn't ever think of it as a business. I was never interested in writing books. It was a hobby. But the hobby led me to study archaeology briefly in university. It led me to study evolutionary biology. And then it led me to go and spend time with hunter-gatherer tribes in Africa. It was just a hobby. But about 12 years ago, I had clients asking me for health advice, and that's what led me to start WILDFIT. I decided to bring all the research, everything that I'd learned, and I decided to create a coaching program. Again, still a hobby. It was really just a hobby program that I was producing for my clients, but the word of mouth of the program was so successful that it quickly became bigger than my normal teaching practice.
And do you still practice that?
Oh yeah, I mean, our company WILDFIT, it's still, we've now had over 100,000 people in over 100 countries do the program, and it's led to phenomenal stories of diabetes reversal and weight release and a medal from the Canadian government. Like, it's been, even though it started as a hobby, it's been by far my the professional achievement that I'm most proud of.
Your love to leadership and advocating leadership too much, it comes from these bad moments that you had with your bosses, or what happened? Like, why?
I don't really know. I guess partly I grew up with, my dad was an alcoholic and not an ideal dad when I was young. He and I became very good friends in the years later. But what that meant was that I grew up with a lot of instability. And in a very real sense, it forced me to create stability where I could. I felt sometimes like I needed to protect my mother, or that I needed to protect my brother. And I think maybe on some level that stimulated in me a self-leadership. And I would argue that one of the most important principles of leadership that I can think in the world is that if you can't lead yourself, you have no business trying to lead anybody else.
True.
And so I think even as a young kid, I started developing that sense. And then it just, I went to a very serious boarding school. Like, our sports programs were not, okay, we played hockey and stuff, but the really tough stuff was like snowshoeing 26 miles when you're 13 years old and it's minus 30 degrees outside, or canoeing 900 miles through northern Canada. Like, it was in a very intense school.
Severe.
And that also brought out leadership tendencies because it was tough. It forced us to get to know ourselves.
There was a very interesting program, See You at the Top.
Yeah.
Whoa. That's a tough one. How did you come up with such an idea, and how it goes? What was the program?
So at that stage of my career...
You still do it or not?
No.
Oh my God, I would love to join.
There's a big waiting list. People keep bringing it up on podcasts, and then everybody writes me on Instagram, when's the next one?
Exactly.
No,
It's an interesting one.
There's no next one. But basically what happened was, at that stage, a lot of people were asking me to speak on leadership and leadership communication and that sort of thing. And I was looking at designing a workshop that would really teach the core fundamentals of, let's say, personal leadership, how you lead yourself emotionally. But what I'd noticed was that you could teach these things in a seminar room, and by 3 o'clock that afternoon, somebody would be complaining that the air conditioning was too cold. Somebody else would be complaining that it's too warm. And I was like, did you not hear anything we just said? Like, you're not supposed to be complaining. You're supposed to, we're supposed to be testing you, and you're supposed to be learning how to manage your way through that suffering in a functional way, not whining about how hard the chair is. So I thought, what I need is a metaphor. I need a mechanism by which they could actually test the principles. And, you know, I mean, people use metaphors. You know, Tony Robbins uses fire walking, which is a fabulous metaphor for decision making. Not such a great metaphor for like how to run your company. And I don't think it's a great metaphor for leadership, but it is a great metaphor for like overcoming fear, board breaking, and some of these things. And I started thinking about those metaphors, and I realized that I had climbed Kilimanjaro with some friends many years before, and that it had been maybe one of the most transformative experiences of my life. And that was without a structure or any kind of context. It was just transformative. What if I wrapped a program around that? What if I wrapped a program around it that I would teach things, and then people would go up the mountain with those lessons with me, and we would have the opportunity to unpack the practical use of those skills under those unbelievably demanding circumstances. And in a very real sense, what we did is we created a way of sharing with people an entire year of emotional experience in a week, so that they would get to test every one of the strategies that we talked about around how to manage their state of mind. It was super effective.
Can you give us an example, just one principle, for example, and how it's implemented on the way up?
Sure. One is that very often we have this like keep your eye on the prize, right? You got to keep your eye on the goals, right? Well, there's some truth to that, but if you're only ever focused on the goal, sometimes you can't even tell if you're getting any closer to it. And if you're not appreciating the journey on the way to the goal, then that brings its own host of problems. So as you're going up the mountain, what'll happen is that, well, take a look here in Dubai or in Las Vegas. You can see a building and you can walk toward that building for like an hour. And it doesn't get any closer. It just doesn't seem to, well, think about a mountain that's, you know, 20, whatever thousand feet. It's tall. So you're walking toward it for many, many, many hours. Like you're into the second day and the thing doesn't look any closer. That's how our business goals are sometimes. That's how our achievements are sometimes, is that we're taking these steps and we're taking these steps. And if the only way we're ever going to measure progress is by how close we are to the goal, well, we're going to give up. Sometimes we have to turn around and look back and see how far we've come. Sometimes we have to take a moment and enjoy the specific moment we're in. And that process is a huge part of leadership.
You know, Eric, doing this kind of project or experiment, I would say, sometimes we teach something and we think it's extremely simple, a principle, but once you put it in a kind of a workshop or in a real practice, you see, I thought that's an easy thing. But getting the people to climb this mountain to just, I want to explain or demonstrate a principle, oh my God, it's not that easy as we speak. Can you give me an example, something like that? Like, for example, let's say like leadership is like leading by example. Okay, oh my God, let's go through this jungle. Well, I'm not going to lead, you know, I'm not going to lead by example.
I'll say this, that really effective leadership, as I said, is about knowing yourself very well. And that is to say, knowing your strengths, but also understanding your weaknesses. So I guarantee you that somebody climbing up Kilimanjaro is going to find their dark side. They're going to find their weaknesses. So as an example, one of the exercises that we would do is we'd come down the mountain and we'd sit around and have a conversation, say around the fire. And the conversation would go like this. I've heard every single person talk about the moment they overcame their fears, the moment they overcame their difficulty and they made it. And they, you know, everybody's willing to tell that story, right? But I said, what I want everybody here to do is dig deep and tell us about the doubts. Tell us about the fears. Tell us about the times you thought about giving up. Talk to us about the dark thoughts you were having. And you share that with the room, and then all of a sudden, nobody's talking. Because this is the tough stuff, right? Nobody's talking. And then I go, and now, nobody's talking, but I'll tell you what, here's the next rule of the exercise, is that if you don't call out your darker behavior, if you don't call out your weaker behavior, we can. So if you saw it in somebody else, you can call it out. Now, all of a sudden, people are going, crap, it's not me. Like somebody else might say it. I better say it first. So this one guy, French guy, he goes, okay, I'll tell you. And we're like, what? And he goes, going up this mountain, I hated you. I hated you so much. I hated you all the way. It's your fault, the pain I am in. I hated you. And he's really like angry, really angry. And he goes, and by the way, it was not just you that I hated her, and I hated him, and I hated him even more. And God. this woman, all the whistling and the cheerful, she made me more mad than anyone. And then he goes, and that's when I saw it. I always blame everyone else. And he starts going on about, you know, he would go into a business deal and he'd blame everybody else. And something would go wrong and he'd blame, and he'd hate them for it, and he'd hate them for it. And he would take no responsibility for the decisions that he made. And he even said, as he was speaking, he goes, look, it's not your fault I'm climbing this mountain. He goes, I distinctly remember in the sales pitch, when I was at the presentation, you told us it would be the hardest thing we'd ever done physically in our lives, probably. You said it would be full of pain and full of suffering. So why am I mad at you that I decided to go?
Exactly.
Now, I would put to you that trait, that understanding, he could not have come to that easily in any other way.
Exactly.
He needed to be put under that kind of pressure to see himself properly. And by the way, you come out the other side of that and he goes home and he's a transformed person. You can't, once you've seen that about yourself, you can't unsee it.
True. Why did he stop it? It's a very interesting thing. Why did he stop it?
Have you ever climbed Kilimanjaro?
No.
Okay.
I was waiting for you.
Once you've climbed it,
come and tell me.
Come and ask me why I stopped it. I would say that climbing Kilimanjaro once is something that many people should do. I think it's life-changing, transformative, powerful. Climbing it twice is ridiculous. And I've climbed it 7 times.
Oh my God.
So I you know, the fact is that it is really difficult. It's unbelievably difficult, and it's not and not only that, you know, from a seminar leader perspective, like, look, if I'm running a 5-day program, you know, we have a program called Speaking Academy where I run people through a deeply intensive program on how to become a world-class speaker. It's highly effective. It's super transformative. And I'm on stage for something like 12 hours a day. It is intense. But the other 12 hours, I can be in my hotel room.
True.
I can go for a massage. I can relax. With the See You at the Top program, it was 2 weeks and I couldn't go anywhere. I was in the tent beside you. When people were having some kind of breakdown at 3 o'clock in the morning, they were coming to talk to me, and they were having breakdowns at 3 o'clock in the morning. It meant that I had to be in seminar leader mode basically 24/7 for 14 days. By the end of that, I felt unbelievably drained. I'm super glad I did it, but I came to a point where it's like, that's enough.
So I'm on the waiting list. Once you recharge.
Well, you know, it's funny. A bunch of people over the years have said, yeah, but Eric, come on, one more time. What would have to happen for you to do it one more time? And so I gave them this answer. And the answer was, look, the work that we did there is really important. And if I could find a way to share that work with the world really well, I'd consider it. So here's how I do it. I would do it if it was a fully funded production that already had distribution, say Netflix or Nat Geo, and that had at least, you know, some celebrity star power in it to make sure that it got viewership.
True.
Set that up and I'll go, no kidding. These guys called me one day about, I don't know, 6, 7, maybe a little bit longer ago. And they go, hey, we think we've got Wim Hof and Jim Carrey.
No way.
And are you in? And we're going to film it.
Ready?
And I was like, all right, fine. I'll come for that one. But that trip fell apart, so I didn't have to go.
Right away came manifestation, you know?
Yeah, be careful what you ask for.
Eric, you talk a lot about behavioral psychology. It's not easy for people to change behavior. It's deeply rooted. What are the things do you believe that people need to go through in order to really be able to change their behavior?
Okay, well, let's start with this. It actually is really easy to change behavior, and it's also really difficult. I'll give you an example. If you have a book like Atomic Habits, great book, right?
True.
But in the book, there's a lot of discussion about like how long it takes to create a habit. In other words, how long does it take to create a behavior?
True.
And the book discusses various studies. You know, some people say it's 21 days, 14 days, 65 days, and so on. I would put to you that they're asking the wrong question. They're asking the wrong question. It's not about the number of days. It's about the level of emotional intensity. So if you do something for 65 days with no emotional intensity, I doubt it's going to become a habit for you.
Yeah.
On the other hand, let's take a look at some rookie baseball player in America. He's playing in his first World Series game. He's a brand new player, and weirdly, the circumstances line up where he's at bat, and he has the chance to win the game and win the championship. The pitch comes in, he cracks the ball out of the park, wins the game. Now, is he going to have an emotional experience? Of course he is. He's going to be celebrating. His team's going to lift him up on the shoulders. The city is going to be giving him a parade. He's having a phenomenal emotional experience. That's going to activate something in his brain. And that thing in his brain is going to look back at the 24 hours that led up to that moment. And it's going to ask, now, what did I do to create this magic? And he's going to notice what he ate. He's going to notice his habits. And those things are going to become his game day prep. Like he's going to remember that when he was in the locker room, he tied his shoes. He tied his left shoe first. And when he leaned over to tie his right shoe, he banged his head on the locker and it hurt. There was no blood, but it hurt. And so I'll pretty much guarantee you that for the rest of his playing career, he's going to knock his head on the locker. It didn't take 65 days of repetition. It took a phenomenal amount of emotional engagement.
Oof. I love that. I need more about it. So if somebody wants to change, like let's say, smoking. Okay, it's as an example. How can people? I like this idea to have the emotional engagement in it, or maybe not smoking, something else. But how people can create this emotion? I should create a win or what? So I remembered.
Okay, smoking's complicated because you're dealing with not only creating a habit, but breaking one, right? So when we're talking about like getting somebody to go to the gym, all we're doing is installing a new habit.
Exactly.
When we're talking about getting somebody to quit vaping or quit smoking, then what we're doing is breaking a habit and then hopefully substituting it with something else. But to your point about, let's talk about celebration. Yeah. Celebration is very, very important to the process. And so many years ago, I had this client, could not figure out how to get himself to go to the gym. Just wanted to go, had the logic, had the understanding, knew why he should be going, really wanted to go, but just didn't have the, habit. So I said, all right, do you keep your word about stuff? And he goes, well, yeah. And I go, so if I ask you to commit to a week of behavior, will you do it? And he goes, yeah, but that's not really going to help me. I mean, I'll go to the gym for a week. I've done it before. And I go, that's not what I'm asking. I just, yes or no, will you commit? And he goes, okay, I'll commit. And I go, great. Here's what I want you to do this week. I want you to get your gym bag. And I want you to put your gym stuff in the bag and put your shoes. And I want you to put it by the door at the house. And as you leave the house to go to work, I want you to leave it right there. But when you look at it, I want you to congratulate yourself for putting the gym bag there. Well done. You got the gym stuff together. And he's like, all right. So he does that for a few days. I go, okay, are you ready? He goes, yeah. Next step. Now I want you to put the stuff in the car. I want you to put the gym bag in the car. Should I go to the gym? No, you can't go. I don't even want you to go to the gym. I just want you to put the gym stuff in the car. But when you're driving home from work and you could stop off at the gym, I just want you to congratulate yourself. Like, look at that. I could go to the gym right now. My stuff's in the car. Well done. By the end of the second week, he's begging me if he can go to the gym. He's begging me if he can go to the gym.
I'm ready.
Right? Well, number of things had happened. He'd created an identity. He'd created some behavior, but he'd celebrated each of those moments. Like, hey, look, I got my stuff together. Well done. Now, this may seem a little bit petty, but the truth is that when you celebrate something, you send chemical rewards into your system. Any behavior that you reward, you are likely to repeat. And so that celebration is a massive part of creating that new behavior. If you look at, let's say, the diet industry, for example, this is my current version of it. If an alien, a teenage alien from some other planet came to Earth with a homework assignment, the homework assignment is look at the diet industry and tell us what it's about. So he comes down to Earth and he watches the Weight Watchers commercial, and then he sees the Noom commercial, and then he sees the looks at all the different, the advertisements about weight loss. And he comes back to do a presentation for his class. And he goes, well, alien boys and girls, I've been to Earth and I've looked at the diet industry, and this is what I figured out. First of all, the diet industry is largely based on misleading people about what they're going to achieve. They promise major results with no effort. That's a huge part of it. But then once the people have engaged in it, it seems as though the diet industry is basically designed to damage people's self-esteem, to make them feel shame and guilt. Like, oh, what did you cheat on today? Yeah. What do you have to confess that you ate today? What's really crazy about that is that shame and guilt are food triggers. So what you're doing is you're saying, oh, you were bad, you had a donut. Yeah, I was bad, I had a donut. That's just going to lead to another donut. Oof. On the other hand, what if we focused on this? What if that person did have a donut, but 3 weeks ago they would have eaten 3 of them, and this time they only ate 1? Well done. Well done. You only had 1. Now, this is a small example, but the point is to frame for celebrating victories, as small as they are, to build self-esteem in a very small and incremental step rather than to tear it down.
Oof, I love that one. You wrote a book called The Evolution Gap. Can you tell us a little bit about it and what kind of message you wanted out of the book?
Yeah, the Evolution Gap was born from an initial question. And the question was basically this, that it seems quite clear that we are living in the safest, easiest, best times in the history of Earth. That's not to say there aren't people that are suffering, don't get me wrong, but I mean, you know, on the whole, we have lower percentage of poverty than we've ever had. We have higher level of gender equality than we've ever had. We have higher levels of safety and education for children than we've ever had. And none of us, in the developed world, none of us are wondering if we're going to eat next week. Yeah. You know, we're sleeping in shelter. We have hot and cold running water. We have toilets and toilet paper. Like it is a fantastic time to be alive. And yet we have people checking out like crazy. They're checking out on Netflix. They're checking out with food. They're checking out with drugs. They're checking out with prescription medications. There's prolific levels of depression and anxiety, obesity, and what's going on? Suicide is now in the top 10 killers of people in America. So how is it possible that we're living in the best times ever and we are less happy than we've ever been? And that question has been bothering me for a long time. And you know, I mentioned before that I've spent a lot of time with hunter-gatherer tribes in East Africa, and I've thought a lot about evolutionary biology over the years. My great-grandfather found the oldest Homo sapien skull in history, so it's been a big part of my thought process. And I wrote this book because I'm putting forward the idea that there is a gap that has opened up between our very, very slow pace of biological evolution and our incredible capacity for innovation and changing our environment. So, you know, where we evolved for nature, where we evolved to live in one environment, we've changed our environment so much that we're kind of like living in captivity now. We don't really like it. Yeah. You know, we wouldn't go back very easily because we perceive that as really tough. But the truth is that our instincts are wrong. Right now, you get a letter in the mail and you see that it's from a law firm and it's like thick. You start producing cortisol and adrenaline. Yeah. And cortisol and adrenaline are designed to make you faster and stronger and, frankly, not that smart. Adrenaline is not a smart drug. It is a focus drug. And that would have been very helpful if it was a lion that was coming up on you or a rhino. Yeah. Then you want adrenaline and cortisol. But a legal summons? No. And so we live in the world today where things trigger our Paleolithic instincts and cause all kinds of additional anxieties and depression and stress. We live in a world today where our food system has been so hijacked by food manufacturing and lobbyists that we're eating things that we're not really meant to be eating. And then look what that's doing to the world in terms of obesity and diabetes. So the evolution gap is about exploring the disposition or the juxtaposition between our evolved our evolved relationship with nature and our current civilization, which is difficult.
Wow. What is the solution? It's really strange.
Well, it's not that there's a solution.
You know, I'll tell you something.
Yeah.
An example. A couple of days back, I got a phone number. I had a call long ago. And I got the phone number and I was quick. Because you gave the example of the law firm and the tiger or the lion. And this phone number, I remember back, like a couple of months back, I named it Ministry. And I just forgot it. Because next time, like, okay, I will identify the name. And like a couple of days back, I'm driving the car and the name Ministry comes on I was like, what the fuck? You know, like the cortisol, the adrenaline comes out for just the name on it's exactly the same.
Yeah, yeah. And it triggers all that stuff, which would be very useful. I once was walking. I do a lot of wildlife photography. And I was walking with my dad in Africa. And we walked along this ridge and we came down a trail into a dry riverbed. And as we got to the dry riverbed, we looked across and there were 14 lions. Now, I've been in safari parks since I was a kid, and I can tell you lions are much bigger than people realize they are. But they're even bigger when you're not in a car. You know, we're standing there. My dad says to me, he goes, "Are you scared?" And I go, "No, I'm okay." And he goes, "Why?" And I go, "Because I can outrun you." He did not find that funny. But the truth is that we were pumping with adrenaline and cortisol. That was useful to us. We want, in that case, to have faster reflexes. We want, in that case, to be very focused. We want to be faster, stronger, all that kind of stuff. Very useful. Equally, if we get pulled over by the police, you know, we're driving along, going a little too fast. The last thing you want is to be faster and smart, you know, and stronger and full of fear. You don't want that talking to the police. So when you say what's the solution to this, there isn't one, because this gap is everywhere. This gap causes diabetes, it causes obesity, it causes depression, anxiety, racism. I mean, it basically causes almost every problem that we have in society today. So there's not a solution, but there's a methodology. There's a way of coming up with the solution. And the way is to, first of all, observe the problem. Then to imagine where that problem comes from, how is modern life contributing to that problem? Then to look for natural solutions to that problem. And then if you fail to find natural solutions to that problem, to then look for modern solutions. So I'll give you an example. I can tell looking at you, and I mean, it helps that we're here, but I can tell looking at you that genetically you're from this part of the world. You have dark skin and darker eyes and dark hair. And if you look at me, you'd say, well, probably more European. The eyes are a little lighter, skin's a little lighter. And then if we looked at my girlfriend, who's basically translucent, you can see right through her. She's from Estonia. They're visible. They're totally different, right? Why? Well, the reason is that we evolved melanin levels in our skin relative to where we were to the sun. So if you lived in a very hot place, like if you come from equatorial Africa, your skin is very, very black. True. If you come from Norway, your skin's very, very pale. And that was to allow the right amount of sunlight into your body so that you could produce vitamin D and kill off microbes and what have you. That's evolution. And it's perfect. But now technology comes along and all of a sudden we can get on a plane and we can fly a distance in one day that used to take multiple generations to travel. If you think of how long it took for humans to leave Africa and end up in Norway, it took them like hundreds of thousands of years. And over that time, their skin was evolving lighter and lighter and lighter. But now that person from Norway can get on a plane and fly to Nigeria in an afternoon, and they've got the wrong skin color for where they are, right? So how do you close the gap? Well, imagine you're a Nigerian and you're living in Seattle. Like that's a problem. If you're, or London, England, you know, where they don't have sunlight really. So now you take a look and go, well, what's the problem? The problem is my energy levels are low. I have seasonal affective disorder. I'm depressed. I have vitamin D problems, you know, whatever the case might be. So then we look to the solution. Well, the solution is go and get some sun, except guess what? I live in England. That's going to be a challenge for me. I mean, it was sunny one day 8 years ago on Thursday for 25 minutes. I'm kidding, English people. I know that happens twice a year. But the point is that you look for the natural solution. Well, you might find some natural solution. Like, for example, I lived in England for 10 years. I owned a convertible. If you live in Dubai and you have a convertible, it's about your ego. And that's fine. I have no problem with that. But if you live in London and you have a convertible, it's a medical prescription. You should have one.
You know, I never thought about that way.
And you should have a travel agent and you should be going to Spain and you should be traveling. But even that's not really going to help. You're going to have to look for a modern solution. So now you close the gap by looking for first natural solutions, and then you might want to use red light therapy. You might want to put natural lighting in your house. You might want to take vitamin D supplementation. Right?
Wow, I love that. Eric, let's go back to a little bit of leadership. Different people view leadership in an absolutely different way. What is leadership to Eric?
Well, as I say, I think it starts with personal leadership. If you are congruently yourself, that helps a great deal. People follow people that they aspire to be similar to, that they aspire to be like in some way. And so if you are easily fazed and, you know, if you have a quick temper or if you're, you know, nasty to people or, you know, that kind of stuff. I mean, you can be one type of leader. There's no question that works in certain environments, but I think that type of leadership has a shelf life. It can only take you so far. That kind of leader, by the way, can grow a company that might do very well until they leave.
Okay.
But then the company's going to fall into disarray because of that type of leadership. Whereas a leader that's displaying, you know, more humility, good self-management, good congruency, honesty, respect of people, that leader is, and good delegation skills, the ability to delegate and trust effectively. I think that leader is the kind of leader that when they leave the company goes on and on. And here's what's really crazy. The way we look at that today is we look at those two companies. The one had this like driven, you know, charismatic, pushing leader, and then that leader left, and then the company went down the toilet. And we're like, man, that's proof of what a good leader he was. The other guy goes in, he's quiet. He doesn't publish a book with his face on the cover. He doesn't care about all this stuff, and he runs the company, and then he leaves, and then the company goes into the stratosphere, and we go, well, I mean, it was just a good company. No, it was good leadership.
From your perspective, what are the core principles for leadership? Besides the face on the cover, let's put it on the other side.
There's a gaffe, right? Now, but that's a totally different thing. You're building celebrity brand. You should be doing that. You, Tiger Woods, Tony Robbins, you should have your cover on the page.
Done, okay.
Lee Iacocca, probably not so much, right?
But I really love the analogy.
Yeah.
It's really correct.
So I think important traits. I mean, I think you can sort of put honesty and integrity into a bubble. Like I think that if people develop the understanding that you do this thing, that you do what you say you're going to do, that you're going to follow through, that you're going to keep your word. I think that's a big part of it. I think that respect of people, you know, the leaders that I've been really mesmerized in my life are not the ones that talk down to people. They're the ones that listen to people and understand them. I think that's a big trait. I think effective communication, that's a massive part of it.
Yeah.
You know, if you are in communication training, one of the things we talk about is that you can either be an inferential communicator or you can be a literal communicator. So an inferential communicator might be like, wow, it's really dry in here and I'm thirsty. And they're waiting for somebody to go, oh, you're thirsty. You'd like me to get you some water? Whereas a literal communicator would say, hey, excuse me, could I have some water? And so you've got that style of communication, but then you also have that style of listening. So again, some people are inferential in their listening and some people are literal. So an inferential listener is the kind of person that hears you say that the room is dry and they go, oh my gosh, maybe they need some water. Now, what I've seen in the world is that the most effective leaders and the most, frankly, pleasant people to be around are the people that communicate externally, literally. They tell you what they're thinking, they ask you what they want, they give you clear instructions, but they listen inferentially.
Okay.
And they do what they can to anticipate your wants and needs in an effective way. And that, to me, is a very good trait of effective leadership.
But the leadership over the years changed or not? Because I remember 10, 15 years back, I would say the traits of leadership to be a great leader nowadays, it's absolutely different. The EQ came in, the empathy came in. It wasn't there before.
I feel like it was. And I feel like it just wasn't labeled yet. I feel like it maybe just wasn't understood yet. Like I think about somebody like John F. Kennedy. I mean, he was a leader.
Yeah.
And I think he had empathy and EQ. They just didn't have a name for it yet. So I think that some of the traits are, well, look, I'll put it this way. You know, sapiens are about 300,000 years old as a species. And then we're part of a larger family of hominids. Maybe you call that a 6 million year history. I'm going to suggest that the core traits of leadership have not changed through most of that time. The core traits. In fact, I got a really interesting crash course on leadership once. I was visiting with these wild chimpanzees in Mahale in Tanzania. And these Japanese scientists have been following them for generations. They've been following them for a very long time. And they told us about a leadership battle that happened. And it was very interesting. So there was chimpanzees have a different style of leadership than lions. A lion, basically what happens is one day the lion thinks he's big enough and strong enough to challenge the alpha lion. He challenges the alpha lion. If he wins, he becomes the alpha. He will stay alpha for 2 years or so, not very long. And then his own sons will take him out. And the only way that he can make it a little longer is if he chooses to form a partnership with his brother. And then sometimes you have 2 lions that lead a pride, and they'll hold a little longer because there's 2 of them. Chimpanzees are different. They're more like humans. What they do is they cultivate a group of what you might call generals, right? And mostly male, but I think also some female chimpanzees, and they become the generals. And they cultivate that by sharing resources and collaborating and being fair. And so as a result of that, a chimpanzee can become the alpha of that, or the leader of that troop for decades. And which means, of course, a much larger opportunity or longer opportunity to spread genetic material, like have many, many more children than a lion can. A chimpanzee can reign for longer than a lion even lives. Now, in this particular troop, there was a chimpanzee. He was the king, and he was a good king. Like, generally speaking, the tribe was the troop was in good shape. They were good hunting. Everybody was fed well. He made sure that meat was spread around among everybody. Like, he was a gregarious, good king. But one day he was challenged. And he was challenged by one of the other chimps that came up and attacked him. And instead of defending himself or calling his generals in to defend himself, he just said, fine, you want to be the leader? You can be the leader. And so what he didn't have was a strong passion for leading. He didn't have that. Yeah. He let it go. Now the new leader comes in, and the new leader was a bully. He was super aggressive. nasty. He hoarded the meat. He bullied people. He picked on people. The entire quality of life in that troop went down when he became the leader. It was awful. Weirdly, or interestingly, one day one of the chimpanzees just had enough and challenged him. And they got into a fight. He got bit on the face, and he's bleeding, and he runs down the trail, and he gets to a group of his generals, and he's like, help me. The generals are supposed to help him. Instead of helping him, they pinned him down, and they bit through his biceps and triceps and Achilles tendons, which first of all speaks of a remarkable understanding of anatomy. Yeah. But then they spent 2 hours, now they've immobilized him, they spent 2 hours killing him slowly. Now, that's not animal behavior. That sounds pretty human, frankly. But what's interesting about this to me is that you have one leader who had generally good gregarious skills, a sense of fairness, a sense of respect, but not enough self-esteem to hold on to that position. And as a consequence, his reign was cut short. Then you have somebody else who comes in who doesn't have that balance of fairness at all and has an arrogant level of self-esteem that ended up getting him killed. These are the extremes. True. And what evolution is doing ultimately is trying to ping pong back and forth so you end up with the right mix of those things. And I think that the two traits that I think a lot about right now in leadership are the humility to not need to be in front of everything, to not, and it's interesting because when you run a business like mine, where I'm teaching and I'm on stage, it's tough because it's like I also should have a book with my face on the cover, but not because of my position as a leader, but because of my position as a teacher. True. In my businesses, I think I have to take a different approach, and I think humility is a big part of that. And then the other one is the undeniable sense of passion that this must happen. And those two things together are massive.
I love that. Eric, I would love to know the experience that you had with the African tribe.
That's been huge.
How did it happen? Why you chose it, and why you went through this route, and what went there?
So this is one of those examples in life where magic just happens. I mentioned before that my great-grandfather found the oldest Homo sapien skull. So when I was about 12 years old, I'm holding a cast of this skull in my hand and imagining, think about this skull. It's 259,000 years old. What was life like back then? I mean, if you think about this table as like human history, then we're in the present, and then the pyramids are about here. Ancient is about here. This skull is like here. It's like, what was life like? So I was very fascinated by that already. And I also was really fascinated by African nature. I was doing lots of wildlife photography and spending a lot of time in sub-Saharan Africa anyway. And then I created my See You at the Top program. One day, coming down the mountain, my logistics partner came up to me and he goes, I Googled you. And that's what people do these days. And he goes, and I think, based on what I've seen you speaking about, writing about, you'd be interested to meet some Bushmen. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, well, I think you'd want to meet them. And I go, we have them here in Tanzania? Because I knew there were some left in Namibia and that part of the Kalahari area. He goes, yeah, we've got the Hadzabe people. They live here and we can go meet them. And this is over 15 years ago. These days, it's quite popular to go meet them for your Instagram picture or whatever. This is long before that. And I went to go meet them, and it was life-changing for me. I saw things that it just changed my entire perspective on life, on food, on exercise, on family dynamics, on communication, on relationships. It just showed me things that I just didn't understand before. And I've now been visiting them consistently almost every year for 15 years.
Consistent.
Yeah. Oof. I've even done long embedded stays where I've gone down to stay with them. I don't take food. I only take water because gotta have the water. I can, and then I go and hunt and live with them like I'm a member of the tribe. It has been one of the great honors of my life. Last year, we went back in November and they held this, they didn't tell us what was going on, but they had this big ceremony, and then they made me an honorary member of the tribe. And it was like, that meant more to me than I think than any award I've ever had.
True. But what kind of things? You said a lot of things changed. What changed?
Maybe one great example of that is that my guide, and he's a good friend of mine, his name is Gasper, and he asked me once, why do you come back? Like, some people come here, even anthropologists, they come, they do their study, they never come back. And these days you get the people who come because they're going to get their picture and try and get on Joe Rogan with their story of being with the Bushmen or whatever. He goes, but you just keep coming back and you stay for a long time and you get to know them. And he goes, why? And I said, well, you know, because I feel like there are observations about their lifestyle that will show us what might not be working for us right now. That there are some things about their life that I think if we were to learn from them and bring that to our life, that things could be better. Now, I said this to him many years ago. Years later, we're getting ready to do one of our trips, and he's been trying to get me to go visit this school. It's his school, and I'll tell you, I feel guilty even saying this, but when you've climbed Kilimanjaro as many times as I have, every porter, every guide has a school or a library or an orphanage. Most of them don't have one. They're just trying to get more tips. And I know, look, whatever, but so Gasper keeps telling me about a school, and I'm like, oh, Gasper, we have such a good relationship. Why ruin it with this school pitch all the time? Well, one day I'm looking at the itinerary and he goes, and I go, Gasper, there's like a 4-hour gap here. And he goes, oh my, there is. How strange. I guess we could stop at my school on the way.
Oh shit.
He totally got me. So I'm like, all right, fine, we'll go see. We get to his school. And I have visited many schools in Tanzania. We've even built a couple. Like I've been around education there, and I can tell you, it's not pleasant. The kids are not healthy. They're not getting good nutrition. It's really tough there. I go into his school. The kids look amazing, and they're super engaged, and they're obedient, and they're playful, and they're playing sports, and they look healthy, and their eyes are clear. And I'm like, holy cow, Gasper, you've done such a great job with your school. Tell me the story. You go, well, his grandfather left him some land on the foothills of Mount Meru, and he decided to build a school there, and he's built it from his own money. He just like it's just been incredible. And I go, yeah, but the kids, Gasper, the kids, they look so good. They look so good and healthy. Like, what's going on? He goes, you don't remember? I don't remember what. And he goes, years and years ago, before I built the school, you and I were sitting around the fire, and I asked you why you keep visiting the Hadzabe people. And you said that you felt there were things we could learn from them, and if we applied those lessons in modern life, we would get better. And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, you specifically told me one of the things we could learn from them is about nutrition. Look at the way they eat compared to the way we eat. I mean, they don't have obesity and diabetes, and we do. Like, what's going on? And he goes, so most of the kids in Tanzania, and this is sadly very true, live entirely, at least at school, entirely on ugali, which is, you know, wheat meal and cornmeal, which are nutritionally empty. They're just awful forms of sugar. And he says, so our kids get fresh fruits and vegetables, and they get meat twice a week. They're fed well. And I learned that by spending time with you with the Hadzabe. I would say to you that one story is demonstrative of another 1,000 things that we can learn from them.
Wow. Eric, if I go back to your journey and I ask you, what is your favorite failure to date? A failure that you're proud of, changed a lot.
Favorite failure. You know, when I first decided to become, say, a health coach, I had turned my own health around. I was living a new life. I changed so much, my mom didn't even recognize me. Like it was a complete change. And of course, many of my friends would come and go, oh, I want this. What have you done? And so I started trying to help them. And I knew what I had done. And so I'd write out a plan for them. This is what you do. This is how you do it. This is what you eat. This is what you don't eat. This is how you exercise. And it didn't work. It would work for a week. So, you know, one of my friends, it worked for him for like 2 weeks. He lost almost 30 pounds, and he needed to badly. But then one day we went out for dinner, and he ordered dessert. And I mean, not that there's, look, I have dessert sometimes, but when you're on the recovery path, maybe not yet, right? And over the next couple of months, he put the 30 pounds back on and then put on another 30 and another 30. And I kept seeing this happening. And it was like, I felt like a total failure. I was like, I can't help these people. I'm giving them exactly
the blueprint.
Just do this. If you do this, it'll be okay. And they wouldn't do it. And that caused me so much pain, particularly because many of the people coming to me for help were people I really loved and cared about. They're friends of mine. And then later it was some, you know, clients of mine. Like I would teach these classes and I would teach them everything. And then I'd bump into them 6 months later and they hadn't lost the weight. They still had the acne. They still had the diabetes. Like, you know, why are you not changing? And that caused me to rethink my entire position on the way this worked. It caused me to examine what was not working and why we were failing, and what worked. And so I developed a different way of teaching people called behavioral change dynamics. And it's a system of education that guides how you put content together for people. So when you're designing a retreat or a seminar or a talk or a digital program or even writing a book, it gives you a series of principles and filters and structures for how you organize the information and how you deliver the information so that it's effective. And I launched it with some fear, because helping people, coaching them on health, is maybe one of the hardest areas. You know, it's crazy when somebody wants to learn how to make more money and you tell them do some stuff, they go do the stuff. Yeah. But when somebody wants to change their diet,
oh my God,
they do the stuff for about a week. So I created this system. I put it into a health program. I went into the studio, recorded the health program, and then I released it. And it just worked. I mean, it was just phenomenal. We had an 85% completion rate on a 3-month digital training program. By word of mouth alone, it just started growing. My accountant came to me one day, because we were teaching business mostly. My accountant came to me one day and said, we're now making more money on health coaching than we are on the business coaching. Oof. But think about this. People were paying less than a third for the same hours. Like, people would pay, say, $5,000 for one of our programs. The exact same program for health, they wouldn't pay more than $1,000 for it, right? But even with that, we were making more money over here. And it was because our clients were telling everybody, and it wasn't that they
the results.
Yeah, and it wasn't even that they wanted to tell everybody. It's that their friends would go,
"What happened?
What happened?" Yeah. And so, you know, to date, we've had over 100,000 people in over 100 countries go through this program. It has been by far my the professional achievement that I'm most proud of. But it only happened because I failed the first time.
True. If I flip it, what is the proudest moment you had for an accomplishment or something?
Yeah, you know, it depends on how I measure. I mean, I have to say, the fact that I get to wake up almost every day today to messages on Twitter and Instagram from people saying, I'm no longer diabetic, I've lost 30 pounds, we finally were able to have a baby when we couldn't have one before. I mean, that happens to me just about every day. And that's I don't know how to, I mean, that's a privilege. And I think that's the thing that drives me the most. One of my favorite things in the world to do is to help somebody uplift their quality of life. Like, you know, many people are living in this kind of, you know, suffering, struggling stage. Like, how do I get to the next level of something? And when your health is not right,
True.
then everything is harder.
True.
And so I think that's the thing that I'd have to say I'm most proud of.
Going a little deeper then, how do you define success to you?
Well, I guess it depends on the project. I mean, if you're trying to build
feel like successful and fulfilled doubts.
I feel like success is most easily measured by how consistently you feel happy and contented. You know, it's like, it's not about the material things or the amount of money that we make. I mean, all those things can help, but I think that at the end of the day, you know, when you're maybe lying on your deathbed and looking back at your life, the real measure is going to be how much of it did I enjoy.
True.
You know, like I see people, for example, who have jobs that they hate, but it pays them a lot of money. It's like, well, so what you're basically saying is you're allowing yourself to be paid for suffering. I'm like, well, I would rather create a life with the maximum level of enjoyment. Not to say that everything should be easy. No, I know people wouldn't like that either, but I think that if people choose their own challenges, then they'll enjoy them more. You know, I'd rather climb Kilimanjaro every now and again and strengthen myself that way than, you know, than in some of the others. I think it really does come down to that. You know, the more frequently you feel happy and contented, I think the more successful you are. For me, for example, like the more nights I get to sit around a fire under the stars, the more successful I feel as a human.
True. These days, entrepreneurship is a trendy word, and everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. What do you think the qualities that people need to cultivate these days, or skills, that to become a successful entrepreneur?
Well, I'll offer one thing about entrepreneurship, and that is that for a huge part of human history, the haves and the have-nots were divided by hereditary lines. If you were born into the family, then that's how you had it. You know, you've got royal families here, royal families in England, all over Europe. But in the old days, that was the only way.
True.
You know, that if you were lucky enough to be born in, good for you. If you weren't, that was the... Entrepreneurship is the opportunity to join the royal sect. And it's available to anybody. I feel like I live like royalty. I mean, I live on a beach. You know, we have staff to help with certain things in the house. I often get to fly in the nice part of the plane. I drive nice vehicles. I feel like royalty. And I wasn't born into royalty, but I was able to get myself there. And I think that's what entrepreneurship really is today. And so the traits that are required for it, I think are, I mean, there are many, but I think, you know, leadership helps a great deal, as we've already talked about. I think that tenacity, you know, I think these days, very often people think about goal setting as like, if I imagine the goal and I visualize the goal will come to me. I'm like, no. If you imagine that goal and you're emotionally engaged with that goal will pull you to it.
True.
And if you listen to the way Steve Jobs spoke about passion, if you listen to the way Elon Musk, like, here's a good example. Elon Musk runs the most successful space transport company in the world. There are other people that created space transport companies. Why is he so much better? Because he wasn't building a space transport company. He's on his way to Mars.
Yeah, true.
Right? You know, he has this vision. It's absolutely pulling him toward it.
True.
And I think that the ability to create that vision and then emotionally engage with that vision and stay on track with that vision is a major part of it.
I love that.
And I'd say the third piece, and there's many more, but I think the third one is effective communication. You know, really being able to, whether it's one-on-one and establishing rapport and having a good connection with one person, or it's the ability to stand on stage and lead people with a great presentation that inspires them, that educates them, that evokes emotional response in them, that changes everything. I mean, again, if we look at some of the greatest businesses, you know, it's the leader's willingness to stand up and speak and lead and inspire. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, and many others. I think that ability to communicate, even if it isn't that extroverted communication style, the ability to communicate your thoughts effectively to people is key.
Since we're in the Alpha Talks show, if I ask you, how do you define an alpha? What's an alpha for you?
Yeah, it's funny that these days there's all the debate about,
True.
You know, is alpha the right term and all this kind of stuff. I think the first thing is that when we see the kids out there that aspire to be alpha, well, one of the ways that you know you're not is that you aspire to be.
True.
You know, and then one of the ways you know that you probably have gotten there is you don't care anymore. It's not about, you know, it's not an egocentric thing. I think one of the ways that I think of alpha is, do people feel safe when you walk in the room? You know, do they feel safe? I mean, the right people. And the wrong people, do they feel unsafe when you walk in the room? Right?
True.
And so I think those are some of the traits. I feel alpha in my life, and I'll tell you one of my measures is my partner Kirsty. She's just an amazing woman, and you know, she wears her Aura ring, and her Aura ring tells her HRV.
Yeah.
And when I'm not home, it's off. When I'm home, her HRV is good. That means that I'm creating a stable sense of peace and security for her. Wow. And I think what could be more alpha than that in your family, that your kids and your wife, and they feel safe because you're there.
Oh, I love how you defined it. We have a section called the Alpha Quickfire. Ask you quick questions. So what is the most important lesson you've learned as a leader in general?
The most important lesson, people. Yeah, and it's not just people, it's the right people. There's a very careful balance between being trusting and being foolish. And I can say that if you're going to walk that line, it means every now and again you're not going to trust somebody you should have, and then every now and again you're going to trust somebody you shouldn't. But somehow you got to try and get that line right.
Oof. What daily habit has contributed the most to your success?
Taking care of my body.
How do you stay motivated during challenging times?
Recognizing the video game principle. Teenagers enjoy the hardest part of the game more than any other.
Yeah.
And if we just look at life that way, you look at it and go, well, this is, I mean, remember, the hardest part of the game is where you level up. True. It's where all the bonuses are. Well, isn't that the same with life? It's a victim mentality to walk in and go, this part is like the bad part that I don't like.
True.
And I still have that. But then, you know, in the dark moments, I go, oh yeah, but this is
The video game.
This is the video game. Like, I got to play it properly.
What's the biggest risk you've taken in your career and did pay off?
Oh, wow. There's been so many. One day, this is not such a rapid answer, but one day a friend of mine invited me to go to the old Lucasfilm model shop, the old Industrial Light Magic original campus. And I got there, I was on a tour, and it turned out that they were trying to raise a bunch of money, and it wasn't going very well. And I took a few risks. The first risk was I turned to my buddy and I go, they're never going to raise money like this. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, I mean, you can't do it like that. They're not telling stories. They're not, and he goes, would you mind telling them that? What do you mean? He goes, well, we have a meeting this afternoon. Would you come and tell the executives what they're doing wrong? And I'm like, I'm on a tour, man. Like, what are you talking about? Next thing you know, I'm in the boardroom and whiteboards everywhere. You can imagine what movies. This is the original Industrial Light and Magic. Everything from Star Wars to Indiana Jones to this is mecca of entertainment. And I'm in this room, and Gavin goes, well, tell them what was wrong with their presentation. I'm like, oh my God, I'm on a tour. So I go, well, it could have been better if we did that and we did that and we did that. And then one of the guys goes, well, we have a group of investors coming in this afternoon. Maybe we can try some of these things. And I said, I think you should. And he goes, no, I think you should. I said, what? And he goes, would you do the investor pitch for us? I'm on a tour. Like, I'm not doing the investor pitch for you. I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating one moment of this. The next thing you know, I'm standing in the George Lucas Theater, 140 seat theater with the screen behind me, and I've got the clicker in my hand. It's like, how did this happen to me? And I'm doing the pitch. I arrived that morning on a tour. And I did the pitch, and then the investor group, they go, it's very good information. We have one question. If we invest, will you be staying on to manage the studio?
I'm on a tour.
On a tour. And I in the end, that group didn't invest, but the owners approached me afterwards and they asked me if I would buy it. And so I took the biggest risk of my life, and I basically, I just stepped in and I bought it. And immediately after I bought it, I found out that it was the worst decision ever. It was full of fraud. Not from Lucasfilm. Lucasfilm was so good to us every step of the way, but the people who bought it from them and then sold it to me, it was bad. And I spent years in litigation and what have you, but we turned it into a phenomenal success. We were doing Hollywood special effects. We worked on Avatar, Pirates of the Caribbean, Transformers, and a bunch of stuff. We were doing creatures. And one day the US military came to us and asked us if we could design military simulation mannequins so they could train medics on on battlefield injuries and stuff. And we started that business, and we turned it into a very successful business, and we won awards from US Army and from Congress. And so where the movie investment was a bad decision, it ended up being one of the most rewarding business adventures of my life by far.
How do you manage your time with all these things and you stay focused?
People ask me that a lot, and it's like, what's your morning routine? I'm just not like that. I'm very much passion-oriented sprints. What happens is that I'll come out of a meeting and I'll know what needs to happen, and then I'll be hyper productive getting those steps taken care of very strongly. One of the things that I've struggled with over the last few years is that because I live in the Caribbean and my team is scattered everywhere, I found that I'm not that good at that. I don't like working on my own. Look, when I'm writing and stuff, I like being on my own, but when it comes to other stuff, I find that more difficult. One thing that I really helped myself with years ago is I developed a different system of managing to-do lists. In fact, there's an article, people can find it on Medium. It's like how to do more by doing less. And basically the idea is a silly psychological thing, but have you ever made a to-do list and then you did something that wasn't on the list, but you then added it to the list and ticked it off?
Of course.
Of course, right? Well, I would say that that describes a low-grade personality disorder. There's something wrong. Because, you're putting it on the list. The list is supposed to be reminding you of what to do, but now all of a sudden you're putting something you already did. Why? Dopamine. You're doing it for the dopamine, right? Now, if you think that dopamine is that attractive, well, let's look at it another way. Imagine that you have 10 things that you need to do in the day. You got 10 things, and you only get 6 of them done. How do you feel about yourself? You feel a little half-assed, right? Oh man, I'm not very accomplished. I didn't have a very good day. Now what I would say is, if I was your coach, let's say I come and I'm working with you in the morning and I go, hey, look, show me your 10 things. 10 things. Okay. I want you to pick 5 of them you're not doing today. You're not doing them today. And you move them over to not doing these today. And now you get your 5 things done and you go, you know what? I'm going to do one more. And you do the 6th thing. Now you've done 6 things. How do you feel about today? Now you have dopamine, you have serotonin, you have self-esteem. That one shift can change productivity by multiple times over time. It'll affect you a little bit on the first day you do it, and then a little more the second day, but pretty soon you start getting this feeling of being accomplished. And the more accomplished you feel, the more effective and efficient you become, and so on.
I love that one. I'll follow that one. I love it. If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Do you know, I get that question a lot, and I'm going to say this, that maybe it's because of too many sci-fi movies or being a time travel purist, but I wouldn't say a damn thing to myself. I like what I'm doing. I like where I've ended up. I wouldn't want to interfere with that. I wouldn't want to go back and warn because here's the temptation.
It's like
I want to go back and go, hey, listen, in October of 1987, a guy is going to walk up to you in the gas station where you're working, and he's going to light you on fire, because this happened to me. And I'd like you to avoid that. I'm going to give you the advice how to avoid being lit on fire. You can see my hands are slightly different colors. I have keloid scarring all over here. I nearly lost my hand. They told me I would never write again. And of course, I'd like to go back and tell myself, you could avoid that. Except, well, it's one of the many things that helped me develop toughness. It taught me a lot about first aid. It taught me a lot about how to do burn treatments, and I've had to help people with their burns several times since. Now, I'm just using that one example, but the truth is that any attempt I would make to go back and speak to the past self is to say that I have a better plan than the universe had for me, and I don't think I do.
I'll go to another thing. Did you get ever an advice that really changed your life?
Many, many times.
What would be?
Many, many times. And I'll tell you that one of the main reasons that I speak today, that I'm willing to travel around the world, that I'm here, I'm here doing an engagement with Emirates. One of the reasons that I teach today is that people gave me advice. They took the time to take their wisdom and put them in books, put them in CDs. Not CDs. Streaming programs and podcasts. Not tapes, of course. But because people took the time to do that stuff, that became part of my journey. So if I think about Tony Robbins, for example, he had long before I met him and I toured with him and all that kind of stuff, as a kid, at 18 years old, I'm listening to, yes, it was tapes, and I'm listening to tapes in my car. And the advice and the strategies that he shared at that time had a massive impact on my life. And, Jim Rohn and Stephen Covey and those types of people, but also my father and the teachers that I had in boarding school. I remember, here's a good example. I went to go see a public talk by some speaker that I've never heard of and never heard of since. So not some famous speaker, nothing like that. And his name was, I think, Bob Ramito. I don't know why his name sticks in my head, because I was 21. But he walked in and he said, look, at the end of the day, the only thing that you really have of value is your reputation once you've lost everything else. If you lose everything else, your reputation is the only thing you really have left. And he goes, so my question is, do you keep your word? And I thought a lot about that. And I thought, well, I think I do. I do best efforts to keep my word. I'm an honest person. He goes, yeah, but there should be something beyond that. There should be something beyond your best efforts. There should be the absolute commitment to truth, the absolute commitment to commitment. And he said, you should know the difference. And he said, I believe the difference is the word promise. And so now I've built upon that over the years, because I can tell you that if you want to predict what happens in a movie, just look at the word promise. If Bruce Willis is a miner and he's about to be sent up to fight an asteroid from hitting Earth, and his little daughter, Liv Tyler, says, Daddy, please don't go. And he says, I'm back. I'll be back, I promise. That means he's not coming back. Hollywood has taught us that promise means a wish and a prayer. Yeah. But what does promise really mean? It means absolute commitment. So now, once I saw that talk, I was 21 years old. I saw that talk, and a friend of mine says, hey, are you coming to the party on Thursday? Yeah, I'll be there. Do you promise? No. I don't. I mean, for all I know, Bruce Willis is not going to stop the asteroid, and the planet, I can't promise. But plus, I mean, something else might come along. I might get sick. I'm not going to promise. I'm going to be there, but I'm not promising because a promise is another level.
True.
It's like, I am unbelievably committed that this is going to happen. Client says, oh, you're shipping the stuff to me? Yeah. Will I have it by Thursday? Yeah. Do you promise? No. I don't work for Federal Express. Exactly. I promise that I'm going to hand it over to the depot today. I promise that. But I won't extend the promise beyond that. And I have to say that one speaker completely changed my life, because not only have I kept promises ever since then, I also keep them to myself. I don't make them very often. I'm really clear about the difference. I rarely make them. But when I make a promise, I've learned this lesson, don't do it again. I made the promise once that I would work out every single day for a year. And I did it. And I kept the promise because I knew that to not keep the promise would be to damage my own self-esteem. But I hated that promise. I remember once I landed, I don't remember, I was in Stockholm or I don't know where I was, but I landed. It was like, you know, I'd been flying all night. It was 3 a.m. and I got into bed and I pulled the covers up and I was just drifting off, and my head went, you haven't worked out yet. And I was so angry. I was so angry because at least if I'd forgotten, I could have blamed my memory, but my voice jumped in and told me to go. I got up and I did my workout and I went back to bed. Now, what I learned about that is 2 things. One is I keep promises, but the second one is don't make promises that you can't live with. You know, that I would never promise to work out every single day for a year ever again. But if I wanted to restart my workout habit, I might promise I'll work out 3 days a week, every week this month. That's a promise that I'm happy to keep.
True, I love that. If people watching us and would like to connect with you, what is the easiest way they could connect?
Truthfully, Instagram. I manage my own account, and and people write to me and I actually respond. They can also go to www.eric.ee. That's my website. And those are probably the best ways.
I'll leave these all in the description. And what will be the last message you want to leave the audience with today?
Well, I think that it picks up on the theme that we've already talked about today, and that is that we've all heard this expression, but I'm going to say it a little bit differently. It's not simply that life is always happening for you instead of to you, but the way I'd like people to think about it is life is always consistently and continually happening for you, even when it doesn't feel that way. You know, like very often people can go, oh yeah, I know life is happening for me, but then things go bad. And it's in those moments that we have to hold on to that truth. True. It's in those moments. And I'll kind of wrap it up with, we already talked about this with the teenagers, but if you want a teenager to stop playing a video game, what you do is turn the skill level down. If the game gets too easy, they stop playing.
True.
I think there's something to be thought about there, is that our lives are not meant to be easy. They're meant to be fulfilling.
I love that. The last question, the most pressing one. The Ray-Ban glasses that you're wearing, is recording me or not?
No, they are not currently recording you.
I was trying to look good, you know.
But I'll tell you what, I'm going to be doing a presentation tomorrow, and if I charge them up before we go, I'm going to wear them. I'm going to wear them when I walk on stage. And I like doing that for my clients because they get to see what it looks like when you walk in front of like thousands of people. So I'll do it.
Eric, it's been a pleasure. I have a part left in the episode which is called the Alpha Talks Memoir, where after the recording, the Alpha guest has to write like what's your experience in the show. But important is to write a question to the next Alpha guest. So now you need to answer the question from the previous Alpha guest.
Okay.
Are you ready? I hope he's not talking about the Ray-Ban. Let's see. Oof. What is your go-to strategy to get yourself out of a tough mental state?
My go-to strategy, I have several. It sort of depends on the circumstance. One is working out, going for a run or going for a workout or going for a jiu-jitsu class or something like that. I think that always helps. And another one is, and this is really key, is eat really good food. And I don't mean yummy. It should be yummy too, but I mean like the temptation when you're in tough times to go to emotional foods, which are generally carbohydrate based, actually just makes the whole thing harder. It's the wrong fuel for fighting problems. And so I mean, I'm generally pretty disciplined about the way I eat anyway, but when times get tough, then I become even more focused on putting the right fuel in.
Wow. I love that. Thank you very much. It's been an amazing episode. I'm sure everybody watching and listening will get a lot of knowledge, value, and I'm sure we're going to do another episode together.
Sounds great.
It's been an honor, pleasure, and see you more in Dubai. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
That wraps another inspiring episode of today's show. I hope that this episode has ignited your inner alpha and left you feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to conquer any challenge that comes your way. Remember, alphas aren't born, they're made. It isn't about dominating others, it's about embracing your authenticity, leading with integrity, and making a positive impact on the world. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the Alpha Talks on your favorite podcast platform. Leave us a review and share the podcast with your fellow alphas. Also connect with us on social media at Seif El Hakim. Share your thoughts, insight, and stories of personal and business growth with us. Let's create a movement of alphas supporting one another. The world needs more alphas like you exactly. Until next time, stay bold, stay driven, and stay alpha.